My dad passed away about 6 months ago. He had a sudden heart attack, and none of us saw it coming. One day he was there, larger than life, the rock of our family, and the next day he was gone. I've always been close to my dad. Growing up, he was the parent who was always there, supporting me at school events, giving advice, and working tirelessly to provide for us. My relationship with my mom was fine, but we never had the same closeness. She was often distant, spending time with her friends or on hobbies that kept her out of the house. As for my siblings, I have a brother and a sister. We're close in age, and growing up, I thought we were a pretty tight-knit trio. My brother, the oldest, was the rebellious one, always testing boundaries. My sister was the social butterfly, always the center of attention. I was the youngest, the quieter, more introverted one. Despite our differences, I thought we were bonded by a shared love for our family. But I now realize I was naive. When my dad passed, it felt like the foundation of my life was ripped out from under me. I was grieving, but I also felt a responsibility to keep the family together. My mom and siblings were devastated too, or at least that's what I thought at the time. A few weeks after the funeral, we met with my father's lawyer to discuss his will. I went into the meeting thinking everything would be divided equally. After all, isn't that what most people do? But when the lawyer started reading, I was shocked. My dad had left everything to me. The house, his savings, his retirement accounts, even his car. My mom and siblings were completely excluded. I was stunned. My mom started crying immediately, saying, "There's no way he could do this." My siblings were furious, calling it unfair and saying the lawyer must have made a mistake. But the lawyer assured us that this was intentional. My father had updated his will just a few months before he passed. At the time, I was confused and overwhelmed. I couldn't understand why my dad, who loved all of us, would make such a drastic decision. I even felt guilty for being named the sole beneficiary. I thought maybe he had been angry at the time or not thinking clearly when he made the changes. Over the next few weeks, the guilt started eating away at me. My mom and siblings kept dropping hints about how unfair it was. My mom would cry about how she couldn't afford the mortgage without my dad's income. My siblings talked about their student loans and living expenses. I started to think, maybe my dad made a mistake. Maybe I should make it right. After a lot of sleepless nights, I decided to split the inheritance. I hadn't even touched the money yet because it felt wrong to do so while my family was struggling. I figured we could divide everything 3 ways: my mom, my siblings, and me. That way, everyone could move forward and no one would be left out. When I told them my plan, they were ecstatic. My mom hugged me and said I was a good son for stepping up. My siblings thanked me and started talking about how they could use the money to pay off debts and improve their lives. I felt relieved, thinking I was doing the right thing. Just as I was finalizing the paperwork to split the inheritance, I received an email from my aunt, my dad's sister. She said she'd been hesitant to get involved, but felt I deserved to know the truth about why my father's will was the way it was, because she heard rumors that I'm planning to split my father's inheritance with my mother and my siblings. The email was long and detailed, but here's the gist. A few months before he passed, my father found out that my mom hasn't been faithful to my father and had a long affair with her high school sweetheart. Not only that, but my siblings weren't biologically his. He confronted my mom, and she admitted it. To make things even worse, my siblings apparently knew the truth for years and had been secretly meeting their biological father. My aunt included screenshots of texts and emails between her and my dad. In these messages, my dad poured his heart out, saying how betrayed he felt by everyone he loved. He described how he had always suspected something was off, but never wanted to believe it. My mom's confession confirmed his worst fears. The messages were heartbreaking to read. My dad talked about how he felt like his entire life was a lie. He said he couldn't bring himself to leave anything to my mom or my siblings because they had all betrayed him and hurt him deeply. He wanted to make sure that everything he worked for went to me, his only biological child. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My entire family life, as I knew it, had been a lie. I decided to confront my mom. At first, she denied everything. She said my aunt was lying and trying to stir up drama. But when I showed her the screenshots of my dad's messages, she broke down and admitted it. She said she had made mistakes and that the affairs happened because my dad was emotionally distant and never really loved her, which was complete nonsense and a lie. My father adored my mother. Then she said they couldn't get pregnant with my father, and she desperately wanted kids. When I asked her about my siblings, she admitted they had known the truth for years and had been secretly seeing their biological father. She tried to justify it by saying they didn't want to hurt my dad. But how does sneaking around with their real father behind his back not hurt him? I was furious. I confronted my siblings next, and they didn't even seem sorry. They said they didn't ask to be born into this mess and didn't owe my dad anything, as they had a right to know who their real father was. At that moment, I decided I couldn't go through with splitting the inheritance. I told them I was keeping everything, just as my father intended. My mom burst into tears, calling me heartless. My siblings accused me of being selfish and letting them suffer for something they didn't choose. I reminded them that my dad didn't choose to be lied to and betrayed either. They had years to come clean, but instead, they lived off my dad's hard work while sneaking around with their real father. The guilt trips didn't stop. My mom said she wouldn't be able to keep the house without my help. My siblings said they'd have to drop out of college and that I was ruining their lives. It got so bad that I blocked all of them on everything: calls, texts, social media. They're now using unknown numbers and emails to contact me, saying I'm leaving them to be homeless and broke. They keep saying I'm punishing them for my mom's mistakes, but the way I see it, they all played a part in betraying my dad. I feel torn. On one hand, I know keeping the inheritance is the only way to honor my father's memory. On the other hand, I feel guilty knowing they're struggling. But then I think about how they treated my dad in his final years, and I can't bring myself to feel sympathy for them. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for keeping the inheritance and cutting them off? OP's father made his wishes clear after experiencing a level of betrayal most of us can't even imagine. The inheritance was his to give, and he chose to leave it to OP because OP was the one person who hadn't deceived him. OP's mom and siblings have no right to guilt trip OP into giving them a penny, especially considering how they treated OP's dad. Who knows, maybe the information even caused his heart attack. And now let's hear the community's opinion. I get that your mom and siblings betrayed your dad, but are you sure cutting them off entirely is the right move? Yes, your dad was hurt, but your mom is still your mother, and your siblings are still your family, even if the situation is messy. They're going to lose their home and struggle without that money. Maybe you could help them with a portion of the inheritance, but keep the majority to honor your dad's wishes. It might help you sleep better at night knowing you tried to be the bigger person. Wow, I can't imagine the pain you're going through. Not only did you lose your father, but you also found out your entire family dynamic was based on lies. That's a lot to process. I think you're justified in keeping the inheritance because your dad wanted you to have it. That said, don't let them manipulate you into thinking you owe them anything. They chose their actions, and now they're facing the consequences. Protect your peace, OP. You're definitely not the a-hole, but your family? They're a walking red flag. Your mom cheated on your dad for years, lied about your siblings' paternity, and let your dad raise kids who weren't his while they secretly met with their biological father. That's some next-level betrayal. Your brother and sister had the audacity to act entitled to the inheritance after knowing the truth. They're not just wrong, they're delusional. Block them all and move on with your life. Update. Hi everyone. I wanted to thank you for the comments and support. Reading through your responses gave me the clarity I needed to make a decision. After everything that's happened, I realized I can't keep living under the same roof as people who betrayed my father so profoundly. The lies, the years of deceit, and the sheer possibility that the stress of it all might have contributed to his heart attack. It's too much. I feel suffocated being here, surrounded by people who disrespected and used my dad while pretending to love him. So I sat them down and told them they have 30 days to move out of the house. I kept it as calm and direct as I could. I explained that I can't share a home with people who hurt my father in such a devastating way. I reminded them that this house, along with everything else, was left to me in his will, and I intend to honor his wishes. My mom cried and begged, saying she had nowhere else to go. Brother called me selfish and accused me of punishing them for things beyond their control. Sister said I was cruel and lacking compassion. But at this point, their words don't affect me the way they used to. I've given them enough time and explanations. I'm moving forward to protect what my dad wanted for me. It's been an agonizing decision, but I know in my heart it's the right one. Thank you again for helping me find the strength to do what I believe my dad would have wanted. I'm a 44 female. My sister died after giving birth, leaving 3 kids, BJ, Gracie, Jack. I have 2 kids of my own. I became their legal guardian. Their paternal grandparents and my parents were my biggest supporters, and my biggest curse in them being defiant against my wishes. My sister left me executor of her will, which includes an inheritance for the kids. Gracie was only 9 when she passed and struggled the most with her death. We did therapy. I come from a stern and firm military household, but it seems once my parents became grandparents, that stern and firmness went out the window. She was getting in trouble for things like bad disagreements with other people at school, bad-mouthing her siblings, especially the youngest, told him he's the reason their mother is dead, more than once, skipping class, etc. Things they felt didn't require a consequence, but a talk. Sorry, but I'm not about repeating myself. They didn't agree with me punishing her. They would often disregard her punishment once she was with them, which more than not equaled to them calling me because she was being disobedient. Anyhow, once they fell in line, so did she. When she turned 18, she received her first part of her inheritance, which she handled very well. It was when she moved out at 20 that the bad behavior started again. Her paternal grandparents passed a year apart. Gracie's now 21 and still on the wrong path. She moved back home this year because she ran out of money. Her grandparents left her and BJ money. Her aunt called to inform me they were each getting a big chunk of money and was worried about how Gracie will manage it. Her father shows up 6 months before she's set to receive her inheritance. She and BJ are products of an extramarital affair he had on his wife. His wife nor his family or my sister knew about one another until my sister filed for child support. It was a big mess. Anyhow, I can count on my hand how many times he's seen them since they've been little. He only calls sporadically. BJ cut him out of his life, long time ago. Gracie longs for a relationship with him and he plays on it. I told her he was only around because of the inheritance, and I wanted her to be careful. She gets upset and tells me to stay out of her life, that she's grown. She gets her money and runs through it. I heard her crying to her friend about how she helped her father and hadn't heard from him since. She comes to me the following day talking about getting her life on track and wants to go to college. Part of her money she was going to take and go to college. Didn't happen. She asked me to pay for school. I asked what happened to her money. Then she frowns and responds, "I don't have much left and I helped my father. Now he's dodging me. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" I told her unfortunately no, I didn't want to hear that. But I'm sorry I'm not paying. You're grown. She hasn't spoken to me in weeks. Not the a-hole. You can't help people who don't want to be helped. She had to learn who her father truly was, and losing the money was the only way she would learn. You did your best. 2 children of your own who had to adjust to having their 3 cousins basically become their siblings. And the 3 children who lost their mother and never had a father while adjusting to living in someone else's life and home. I'd say you did a pretty good job, if only one of them is confused about their life. She will find her way eventually. She has to hit bottom, true bottom. Not the a-hole. She had not 1 but 2 inheritances that she should have saved for her college, but instead decided to spend it and give it to a man who you already warned her was just after her money. As soon as he asked her for money, she should have been smart enough to be like, "No, I'm not giving you money. If you want to spend time with me, you spend time with me. You're not getting a part of my inheritance, it's for college." But no, instead she decided I'm going to give him money and hopefully he'll love me. Which is sad, but a life lesson she obviously had to learn, and you are under no obligation to pay for anything. Also, make sure she doesn't try and take any money away from her younger siblings. My sister Laura, 27 female, was adopted by our parents at 12 years old. She really never bonded to our parents. Laura attended therapy, and my parents showered her in love and attention, but they never managed to have a close relationship. I, 24 male, was the only one with whom Laura was able to open up. My grandmother, 87 female, was also very fond of Laura. However, she always rejected her affections, and on many occasions she was rude to my grandmother. Laura went to college, fully paid for by my parents, at 18, and moved away from home. Her housing and transportation was paid by our parents as well. When she graduated at 22, she cut off all contact with our family. We later found out that her adoptive family contacted her a little after she turned 18, and they kept in touch for the 4 years of college. Laura waited for my parents to finish paying for her university to move in with her biological parents. Obviously, my parents were devastated. With a lot of effort, they managed to get out of their sadness and life went back to being normal. We haven't heard from Laura in 5 years. My grandmother recently passed away and she left an inheritance and will. Somehow, Laura found out about my grandmother's death and appeared at the meeting where the will was to be read. The commotion was so great that the reading of the will was postponed. That happened last week. Laura left her contact information with my grandmother's attorney. Today was the reading of my grandma's will, and Laura was there, since she is still legally the daughter of my parents and the lawyer did not want to read my grandmother's will without her. My grandmother left Laura one of her rings of average value and an amount of approximately 10 USD. Compared to what she left me and my cousins, it's nothing. Laura was furious. She threw a tantrum and said that surely my parents had manipulated my grandmother to make her leave nothing for her. At this point, my dad was crying. I got angry and told her that she had no right to anything that my grandmother left because she was the one that cut off contact, not us. I also called her some not very pretty names. Laura called me an a-hole and left the place. Now my mother is mad at me because she thinks this was our chance to talk to Laura again and reestablish a relationship with her, and that I ruined that opportunity. Not the a-hole. Also, your parents are wrong. Laura wasn't there to reconnect. She was only there for the money. OP's mom is absolutely blinded by her own desperation in order to not see the glaring sign Laura's holding that says, "I still don't care about any of you." Not the a-hole. Laura ducked off and cut contact after 5 years, after your parents finished paying off her university fees. And now she's throwing a tantrum because she thinks she's entitled to your deceased grandmother's stuff? She's entitled, and sounds like a giant a-hole. She did you a favor when she cut contact, and she should have stayed away. Your parents are still grieving, and Laura was a massive a-hole to show up when they were grieving the loss of your grandmother and potentially try to take advantage of that emotional state. Also, 10 USD is about all I would have left her too, just to stop her contesting the will. But if that wasn't an issue, I'd say that $10 is maybe $10 too much. I have a brother, and I'm 15 years older than he is. Our parents died when I was 21, and I took in my brother. The only proper thing my parents did was invest in real estate and left behind a will that left me and my brother half. However, I am the trustee of my brother's half until he is 35. My brother married at 22. He's 25 now. I don't like his wife. She's self-centered, a witch, nasty, and can't be nice. But my brother is in love with her. They are very open about never having children, which both saddens and relieves me at the same time. My brother also has some health issues as well. Whenever my brother needed money and he did not have it, he works as a machinist. He would have to ask me. I run his half of the inheritance. I sold all the real estate my parents owned and made a ton of money. I am very strict with what I approve, much to my brother's anger. I tell him I might be his brother, but I am also the bank, and banks just don't give money out. For example, he wanted to buy his wife a $25,000 necklace, and I refused. $25,000 is a drop in the bucket, but that money isn't going to be wasted on stuff like that. Recently, he wanted to buy a nice house and asked for money. I told him that it was probably the smartest thing he's ever asked money for. It's a nice house and a good investment. It will give my brother a good project to work on. I said I would, but only if the house deed is in the name of the trust. He asked why. I told him because I didn't want his wife getting it if something should happen. He started up with his whole, "It's my money" rant, and I told him it is, but I control it for another 10 years. His wife ended up calling me. I haven't spoken to her in years. She tried making the issue of the house as something for my brother. I told her that the trust is between me and my brother, and it's none of her business. She has no claim on it. She asked what did she do to me that made me hate her. I said I don't hate her. I just want to make sure she doesn't get any of the trust money. The idea of my brother getting ill and dying and all that money going to her makes me sick to my stomach. He lost both parents when he was 7, had health issues, and has a massive trust. I am just doing everything I can legally to watch out for his best interest. I've not heard from them in 2 weeks. Edit. I forgot to mention this, but his wife encouraged him to get a lawyer to wrestle control of his half away from me. But even he didn't want to do that, because he knows the trust is ironclad and all hell would break loose. Edit. For people saying it's his money, it is not his money. It doesn't become his until 2030. Edit. For people wondering why he has to be 35, that was decided by the courts, not me. Edit. About the necklace. My brother called me and asked me to wire him $25K. I asked him for what. He and his wife randomly took a trip to LA and were at Cartier of Beverly Hills. He wanted to buy a couture necklace for his wife. I told him no. Edit. My brother does get a monthly allowance. That allowance includes his rent and medical insurance costs. He has those bills sent to me, and I either pay them or I don't. Anything to do with his wife, I won't pay. Edit. My brother has cystic fibrosis. Yes, the a-hole. So you've become the controlling parent now. I suppose as executor of the estate you have that right, but the cost seems high. I would say not the a-hole. I have a trust that I can't access till I'm 30. I'm 27 now. I'm thankful that my aunt, who is in control of the trust at the moment, hasn't given me anything except a car, money from the trust, and offers to pay for school. I have gained $50K in the last 8 years, which will help me when I am 30 and have access. She is doing what's smart for the money. Yes, the a-hole. He is an adult, and adults get to make decisions that other people disapprove of. You are using the money to control him, and from the way you talk, I suspect the reason you don't like his wife is that she stands up to you. If you give a damn about your brother's long-term financial health, set him up with a financial advisor who specializes in helping people lay out budgets and plan for the future. The way you are going now, the second he gets control of the trust, he will burn through the money and cut off all contact with you until he comes begging for yours. I think the wife is clearly showing that she feels entitled to spend this money. Do you think the brother just one day decided he wanted to buy his wife a $25K necklace? I very much doubt that is something he came up with on his own. My husband hosted a dinner party last night for his family. They tend to have a big one 2 or 3 times during the summer, and it was my husband's turn. It was also my 17-year-old son Luke and I's first time meeting his extended family. We both come from pretty well-off families, but his is pretty snobby from what my husband told me. I was a bit nervous, but Luke was a mess. My husband and his stepsisters tried comforting him, but by the time everyone arrived, he would not leave my side. It was okay-ish. They were definitely snobby, but most of them were okay. Maybe slightly out of touch, but harmless. The real issue was dinner. Everyone was sitting at the dining table, and my husband told us earlier that his family say grace before eating, so we were waiting for everyone to get situated. I then noticed Luke fidgeting, and he was starting to sweat as well. I grabbed his hand to calm him down, and he was shaking. I was extremely confused and concerned, and next thing I knew, he had taken a large bite of the mashed potato on his plate. Nobody cared or noticed except my sister-in-law, who was sitting right in front of him. She gasped very dramatically and said, "I can't believe he ate before grace. How disrespectful." She then turned to my husband and said, "Your wife is lovely, but I'm getting bad vibes from the boy." I was shocked and immediately told her to watch her mouth. Her husband, sister-in-law's, not mine, then told me to watch my son. By that point, my husband told them to shut the duck up or leave, so they shut up. But it was pretty awkward, and my sister-in-law was glaring at me the whole time. Before leaving, she told me that I ruined dinner and that she can see where my son gets his behavior from. She implied I was the a-hole for telling her to watch her mouth and embarrassing her and being rude. My husband told me to ignore her, but her other sister and his mother as well are asking me to apologize and start disciplining my son. So, am I the a-hole? It's pretty low stakes as I'm more concerned about my son's behavior. He's been acting extremely out of character, but I want some perspective. Not the a-hole. Discipline your son for taking a bite of food before a grace that his household normally doesn't even say? Ridiculous. Not the a-hole. She disrespected your son in his own home after you made the accommodations for their religious practices that you clearly do not follow yourselves. The entitlement and cruelty of so many Christians really knows no bounds. Update. As a lot of you are aware, my focus was my son, and I told my husband as much, which he respected. He said he would deal with his sister, and he did. But my father-in-law had a pretty terrifying health scare, and we were forced to meet. I didn't want to cause a scene considering the circumstances, but my sister-in-law apologized for saying the things she said, but she also told me that she still believes that my son was disrespectful. She then told me that she had noticed him sneakily eating stuff off the dinner table all night, so before the dinner, and thought that was something I should be aware of. I told her that she needed to apologize to my son, and I don't care about what she finds disrespectful. She just walked off, so I don't know, there wasn't much improvement there. She's also back in the States now, and we won't be seeing her for a while. As for my son, the thing she told me about my son sneakily eating stuff concerned me for a couple reasons, and basically after pairing that with the extreme anxiety and similar behaviors with food, we managed to book an earlier appointment with not a therapist like originally planned, but our doctor. We were then referred to a mental health professional, and after some time he was diagnosed with OCD. Not gonna go into detail about that, but it's been pretty confusing, and I'm just thankful we were able to see a healthcare professional so quickly. We now have a therapy appointment specifically regarding his OCD in the next week, and we're taking this all one step at a time. Also, despite my mother-in-law's previous beliefs about the incident, she has been extremely supportive and told me that she's been thinking it over and that she doesn't think I was in the wrong, as I was just defending my child, who she believes did nothing wrong either. She apologized and now we're cool again. My recently ex-fiancé cheated on me less than 2 months after we got engaged. Obviously, we are no longer engaged. He proposed with a Cartier love bracelet instead of a ring, and we were going to look for a ring together, but yeah. Looking at the bracelet made me sick, so I was planning on selling it or something, just getting rid of it. My brother asked if he could have it to give to his girlfriend if I was trying to get rid of it, and I said sure, since I like his girlfriend a lot, and it's a pretty ducking lightly used bracelet considering. Apparently, he sold it online instead of giving it to his girlfriend, for like $4.5K, because turns out the bracelet is fake. His customer is demanding a refund with the threat of legal action, and my brother can't cough the cash up because he already spent it. He's expecting me to help him cover it so he doesn't get sued, but I don't really trust him to pay me back if I do. He says it's my fault because I didn't say it was fake, but I also didn't know. My ex-fiancé told me it was real. It came in the Cartier box and I trusted him. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Your brother thought he was scamming you out of money by pretending it was a gift for his girlfriend. Turns out, he was actually scamming a stranger. Regardless, no need for you to fix it, so he's back to only scamming you. Not the a-hole. Not your problem. Don't jump down this rabbit hole. Do not give him a single red cent. Here's the reality of litigation. It is extremely difficult if you aren't a lawyer. It's nearly impossible from another state. And collecting $4.5K from someone who is broke is impossible. Any money you give may very well disappear in the same the $4.5K did. Not the a-hole. Your brother asked for that bracelet under false pretenses and didn't bother to make sure it was real before selling it on eBay or something. If what you are saying is true and you had no idea it was fake, then it's all on him. You naturally assumed he was giving it to his girlfriend and not selling it, so you had no reason to check if it was real, and just assumed it was. Given the circumstances, it was given to you. I'm 34, and my sister Emily is 30. My husband and I have been trying to have a child for over 5 years. It's been an exhausting and emotional journey, filled with fertility treatments, endless doctor's visits, and moments where we felt like giving up. The toll it took on us emotionally and financially was immense, but the desire to start a family kept us going. Last year, after yet another failed round of treatment, my doctor suggested we take a break. It was during this time that, miraculously, I conceived naturally. When the test came back positive, I was in disbelief. My husband and I were overjoyed, but also cautious because of everything we'd been through. We waited until I was safely into my second trimester before sharing the news. I wanted to savor every moment of this pregnancy and finally start enjoying what felt like a long overdue blessing. Emily and I have always had a strained relationship. Growing up, she was the quintessential golden child, charming, outgoing, and the center of attention wherever she went. I've always been more reserved, and I never minded that she loved the spotlight. But Emily's need for attention often came at the expense of others, especially me. Over the years, there were countless incidents where she'd make everything about herself. Whether it was a birthday, a graduation, or even our parents' anniversary, Emily somehow managed to steal the show. If she wasn't the focus of the event, she would sulk or create drama to redirect attention to herself. When Emily got engaged 6 months ago to her longtime boyfriend, Jake, it was as if the world revolved around her. She immediately began planning an extravagant wedding with financial help from our parents. Emily didn't shy away from flaunting how lavish her plans were, using every family gathering as an opportunity to gush about her wedding dress, venue, or honeymoon. While I was genuinely happy for her, I also knew that dealing with her self-centeredness during my pregnancy would be challenging. When I entered my second trimester, my husband and I decided it was time to share our news with the family. We announced my pregnancy during a small family dinner, and everyone was thrilled. Our parents were overjoyed at the thought of becoming grandparents, and even Jake seemed genuinely happy for us. Emily, however, was less enthusiastic. She gave us a lukewarm congratulations before quickly changing the subject back to her wedding plans. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she might need time to process the news. But looking back, it was clear that she wasn't happy about sharing the spotlight. Last month, Emily hosted her engagement party, a lavish event funded by our parents. She invited all of our extended family and friends, and naturally, my husband and I were there. I made a conscious effort not to draw attention to myself or pregnancy. I wore a loose-fitting dress and didn't bring up the baby unless someone specifically asked. Despite my efforts, a few observant relatives noticed my growing baby bump and came over to congratulate me. Their congratulations were warm and heartfelt, and they quickly moved on to talking about Emily's upcoming wedding. It was nothing more than polite excitement, but Emily clearly didn't see it that way. Midway through the evening, Emily pulled me aside with an icy glare. She accused me of stealing her thunder and turning her engagement party into a baby shower. I was stunned. I tried to explain that I hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy that night and that people had simply noticed on their own, but she wouldn't listen. Emily started raising her voice, drawing the attention of nearby guests. She called me selfish and dramatic, accusing me of ruining her special day. When I tried to calm her down, she escalated further, yelling that I needed to leave. Mortified, I grabbed my husband and quietly left the party. As we drove home, I started experiencing severe cramping and spotting. Panicked, my husband took me to the ER. I was terrified that the stress Emily had caused might harm my baby. Thankfully, the baby was okay, but the doctors warned me to avoid stress as it could jeopardize my pregnancy. It was one of the most frightening experiences of my life, and I couldn't stop crying at the thought of how close I came to losing everything we'd worked so hard for. When our parents found out what happened, they were furious. They couldn't believe Emily would treat me so horribly, especially knowing how much I'd been through to get to this point in my pregnancy. They confronted her about her behavior, but instead of apologizing, Emily doubled down. She insisted that I was the one in the wrong for stealing her spotlight and refused to take any accountability. After days of heated arguments, our parents decided they'd had enough. They told Emily they were no longer paying for her wedding. This was a huge deal because Emily had already booked a lavish venue, catering, and other vendors, all under the assumption that our parents would foot the bill. Without their financial support, she and Jake would have to either downsize the wedding or figure out how to pay for it themselves. Emily was livid when she found out about our parents' decision. She called me in a rage, accusing me of manipulating them and ruining her life. She demanded that I convince our parents to change their minds and resume funding her wedding. According to her, it was my fault they'd withdrawn their support, so it was my responsibility to fix it. I refused. I told her that I wouldn't try to change our parents' minds, and that she needed to take responsibility for her actions. I reminded her that she was the one who caused a scene at her own engagement party, kicked me out, and contributed to the stress that landed me in the ER. I also pointed out that our parents were adults who made their own decision to stop supporting her financially after seeing how poorly she treated me. Emily wasn't having it. She called me selfish, vindictive, and jealous, insisting that I'd ruined her engagement party on purpose to sabotage her wedding. She's been bad-mouthing me to anyone who will listen, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. This has left our family deeply divided. My husband, close friends, and a few relatives fully support me and believe Emily is facing the consequences of her own actions. Others, including some extended family members, think I should be the bigger person and help smooth things over for the sake of family unity. A few of Emily's friends have even sent me nasty messages, accusing me of being vindictive and unsupportive. Our parents, meanwhile, are standing firm. They've expressed regret for enabling Emily's entitlement for so long and believe this is a necessary wake-up call for her. They've told her they won't reconsider paying for the wedding unless she apologizes and shows genuine remorse for her behavior. So far, Emily has refused, doubling down on her belief that I'm the one who owes her an apology. I'm torn. On one hand, I know I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't announce my pregnancy at her party or intentionally draw attention to myself. People simply noticed my bump and congratulated me, which is a normal and kind reaction. Emily's over-the-top reaction and the stress she caused me were entirely her own doing. On the other hand, I hate the tension this has caused within our family. Part of me wonders if I should try to smooth things over, but I also feel like doing so would only enable Emily's behavior. She's 30 years old. It's time for her to take responsibility for her actions and stop blaming others for her problems. At this point, my priority is my health and the health of my baby. I've worked too hard to get to this point to let Emily's drama drag me down. If she can't see how her actions have hurt me and our family, then that's on her. Reddit. Am I the a-hole for refusing to convince my parents to pay for Emily's wedding after she kicked me out of her engagement party and sent me to the ER? OP has been through so much just to have this baby, and OP's sister's behavior is absolutely appalling. It's one thing to be upset about sharing the spotlight, but kicking OP out of her party and causing her so much stress that OP ended up in the ER? That's beyond petty. It's cruel. OP's parents are absolutely right to pull their financial support for her wedding. She's 30 years old, not a child, and it's time for her to take accountability for her actions. OP should not feel guilty for prioritizing her health and her baby's well-being. OP has done nothing wrong here. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Not the a-hole. Your sister's entitlement is off the charts. She literally tried to kick you out of a family event because people noticed you were pregnant and were happy for you. She literally tried to kick you out of a family event because people noticed you were pregnant and were happy for you. Something entirely out of your control. And now she expects you to convince your parents to pay for her wedding after she caused you so much harm? No way. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. You're not responsible for fixing the mess she created. Let her face the reality of her behavior. It's long overdue. Not the a-hole. This must be such a difficult situation for you, especially with how much you've been through to get to this point in your pregnancy. Your sister's behavior at her engagement party was completely out of line, and the fact that it caused you so much stress you ended up in the ER makes it even worse. I understand why you might feel torn about the family tension, but trying to mend things would only enable her bratty behavior. She needs to grow up and learn that she can't treat people this way. Focus on your health and your baby. You've earned this happiness. Not the a-hole. What your sister did was selfish, immature, and downright dangerous to your health. Kicking you out of her party for something as trivial as people noticing your baby bump was not only petty, but incredibly harmful. You have every right to protect your peace and prioritize your pregnancy, especially after everything you've been through. Your parents pulling their financial support is a natural consequence of her actions, and it's not your job to fix this. Stay strong, and don't let her guilt trip you into thinking you're in the wrong here. You've done nothing but stand up for yourself, and that's exactly what you should continue to do. I'll make it clear, 110%. I dislike my ex-sister-in-law a lot. She and my brother had the most toxic relationship that I've ever seen, and she is one of the nastiest and meanest people that I have ever met. However, she is the mother of my 9-year-old nephew, who I am very close with, and I am like a second dad to him. While my sister-in-law is a witch, my brother is a moron. After my ex-sister-in-law divorced a few years ago, he started his own business. It did well because he had the right people at the right time. He ended up buying a nice house and pays enough child support so he and his ex can live close by and do their 50-50 custody agreement. My brother is an incredibly weak man when it comes to women. He tends to rush into things and portrays himself as this rich, successful businessman who's going to retire in a couple of years and just wants to find a woman to take care of and grow old with. Usually he ends up with women who are just as damaged as he is. At the beginning of the year, he met Cassidy. 3 months into the relationship, she moved into his house with her 3 kids, 22, 19, and 16. None of them had a job, so he got them jobs at his business. Between hiring his unqualified girlfriend and kids, who were now a daily distraction, he made some bad get-rich-quick choices. Then the virus destroyed his business. Now my brother is living off PPP loans while supporting his girlfriend and 3 kids. He is tight on money. He will run out of money by December and won't have enough cash to pay his mortgage or the rent at his business. My ex-sister-in-law lost her job too. To make matters more complicated, My nephew needs braces, and my brother and sister-in-law can't afford that either. My brother had the nerve to ask me for a cash loan to get him through a few months. Do I have the money? Yes. Is it a big financial sacrifice? No, but I refuse to loan him money while he's supporting some trashy family because he wants to keep his girlfriend around. I did, however, loan my ex-sister-in-law money to get my nephew braces and to cover her rent for a couple of months. My brother was furious that I loaned her money, but not my own flesh and blood brother. I told him why I didn't loan him money, and he said his girlfriend and her kids were earning their keep, or whatever the duck that meant. He even told me to stay the duck away from my son. And yes, my ex-sister-in-law will pay me back. I'm not worried about that. She doesn't want to be indebted to me. Not the a-hole. You did lend your money to your own flesh and blood, your nephew. If you lend money to your brother in his current situation, you might as well flush it down the toilet. Good on you for looking out for your nephew. He's lucky to have you. Not the a-hole. There are 5 people in your brother's house who are old enough to get jobs and pull their money to scrape enough together for the mortgage repayments. Also, banks are having repayment holidays, so he could just speak with his mortgage broker. Not the a-hole. Your brother doesn't have a right to your money. You are a good uncle. You did the right thing. Tell your brother he should be mad at himself because his bad decisions are negatively affecting his kid. Not the a-hole. Just because your brother decided to fund the lives of 3 other adults doesn't mean you have to as well. You helped the child, the one that can't help himself. Good choice. Also, he is your blood, so your brother is wrong on that one. My daughter is 20. She's one of 4. She doesn't work nor go to school. We've had countless discussions about this with her. My husband and I pay all her bills. College is not a necessity in our household, so if you're not going to attend school, then work it is. Only she hasn't held a job for longer than 3 months. Her complaint is that she never makes enough money to enjoy herself. I told her, welcome to the real world, kid. The last job she held was over 2 years ago. My husband feels I'm expecting too much of her and to let her be and find her way. She has gotten multiple traffic violations, running red light, not coming to a complete stop at a stop sign, not wearing her seatbelt, speeding in a school zone while children are present, etc. Over $2.5K in tickets. Tickets we weren't aware of. Just so happened she went through a roadblock and there was a warrant for her arrest for unpaid tickets and driving on a suspended license, which happened due to her unpaid tickets. I wanted to let her sit there, but my husband went and bailed her out. We had to pay a little over $700 for bail and to get her car out of the impound, and that's not including reinstatement fees. Upset about it, I had our eldest son take her battery out of her car, which sent her crying to my husband because he's usually the one that lets her get away with everything without holding her accountable. He tried talking me into giving her the vehicle back, but I refused. A car is a privilege. I gave the car to our 17-year-old, which has caused a hellspin of arguments with my daughter. I gave her a choice, go to school or get a job, but a car is out of the equation right now. Until she shows effort, I would no longer pay for her phone bill, no more getting her hair, nails, and feet done, no shopping money. I even cut off her emergency debit card down to $50 a month. She had 60 days to make up her mind about school or obtain a job. That's it. 60 days has come and gone, and she's been sulking around the house and crying to her father with every excuse in the book. She doesn't feel like college is for her. Understandable. She has these high expectations that she's supposed to be making a lot of money out of high school. She doesn't want to work a fast food job. I explained to her that most teenagers and young adults start off with fast food jobs, but there are other options. Most work their way up to a career of their choice. I did, her father did, her siblings do. Father has been pleading her case. I told him that she will never stand on her own if she doesn't know responsibility. I took the legal steps to have her evicted. She was served like 2 or 3 days ago, and it has caused an uproar in our house. My husband states I've gone too far. My daughter is in disbelief and can't believe I would put her out. I won't, but she doesn't know that. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. First, you and your husband need to get on the same page, otherwise all of this is pointless, unless you are willing to separate households. And that's a different level of issue. Ask your husband what happens to your daughter, family, if you died, were severely injured, etc. How will your children cope? How can your daughter possibly succeed in life if she can't launch now with support? If she no longer has that support, what will happen to her? He is setting her up for failure. Him. Once you get hubby on the same page, then you work together on daughter. Honestly, it's going to be an uphill battle because she has already gotten away with so much. Set up action plans and consequences. Then enforce the consequences. You are not the a-hole. Your husband is. Not the a-hole. One thing stands out, and that's if needing the car is a requirement to find a job. But she'd also have to show that she would. What does your hubby think of all of this? What's his timeline for letting her find her way? A year? 5 years? A decade? I'm surprised you're still paying for anything for her if she acts like this. No allowance, no cell phone, no car insurance, no gas, no cosmetics. She gets a room, food, and whatever rules you impose in your household. Of course, you know hubby would sneak her cash to keep spoiling her if the official line was that she was cut off. Is she an only daughter, and is that why your hubby lets her do whatever she wants? Not the a-hole. She clearly needs to get her wits together and start becoming responsible for her own things and learn more discipline, as well as she needs to open her eyes and see the real world that is hard work is the only way to get what you want. No one lives in a movie where you snap your fingers and then have a Gucci life. Also, you need to have a serious talk with your husband because he is also part of the problem by babying her and letting her behavior happen instead of disciplining it and teaching her about responsibility and the consequences of her choices. The moment he stops enabling her behavior is where the first step comes from your daughter to actually grow out of her teenage mindset and into a more young adult mindset. My husband, 26 male, and I, 25 female, have been married 5 years and have a baby, and he still is yet to meet my family because he was in the military and my family lived across the country. So it wasn't always financially doable for us both to fly to my family when he had blocks of leave. He just got out and has 5 days before he starts his civilian job. I had surprised him with plane tickets to visit my family since I had saved up about $2,000 and made plans for us to spend a day in San Diego since it's not far from my hometown and he had been wanting to go back for a long time. He just told me today, 2 days before we leave, that he is going to have his friend pick him up the day we arrive, and he is going to spend the weekend with his friend in San Diego instead. He said he'd come back Saturday night to meet my family, even though he leaves first thing Sunday morning. I told him that this weekend was supposed to be spent with family, and had I known he was going to ditch everyone, that I wouldn't have bought him a plane ticket. This friend he's meeting up with isn't even someone he's talked to in 4 years. I told him if he's going to waste the family trip, then he can crash at his friend's place or pay out of pocket for his own hotel room. I also told him not to ask me for a cent to get food or any extras and that he'd have to pay for it himself. He said I'm being unreasonable because he just wants to see his old friends. But honestly, I'm just beyond upset, especially since I saved money for this trip and family members moved their schedules around us so they could meet him. It's not like I blindsided him. All these plans were set a month in advance. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Honestly, you may want to go further and just cancel his flight altogether. Let him know that if he wants to hang out with friends, he can spend his own time and money, not yours. Also, talk about this, because this is super selfish behavior from someone that you've committed to spending your life with and raising a child together, and does not bode well for the long term. Not the a-hole. It's weird you've been married 5 years and he seems to be refusing to meet your family now that it's planned. I think the bigger question here is why? You need to make him tell you what's up. Your marriage will never last if he's not honest with you. Not the a-hole. OP, I say this as a military member myself. I've seen this a million times. Guys get out and they completely change. There's a non-zero chance that he was just using you for the BAH and off-post housing. I'm not saying that's what he did. I'm saying I've seen it before. The fact that he is ditching you to hang out with someone he hasn't seen in years makes me think that he may become one of those people that gets divorced right after getting out, due to no longer needing the BAH, off-post housing. My brother and his ex-wife finalized their divorce last year, and it was messy. During that time, for a variety of reasons, I had to get involved, and it did not go well. I was given a protective order because my ex-sister-in-law is ducking crazy. She cannot be in the same general area as me. So this last weekend was the final performance of a state dance competition that my niece is a finalist in. Both sides of her family plan to show up and sit at completely opposite ends of the performance hall. However, with my restraining order in place, her mother would be forced to leave if I showed up. I didn't plan to go just to not stir up any trouble, but my niece insisted she wanted me there, knowing her mother could not show up. The truth of this whole situation is, I know my brother and niece wanted me there, so her mother could not legally show up. My brother got full custody of their daughter, and his ex only gets to see her twice a month. In the end, I got pressured into going, and none of my niece's other side of her family showed up. The event went great, but since then, I felt kind of crappy. My niece and my brother just used me to make sure her mom could not show up. My parents got a call from my brother's ex the night of the recital where she was crying and begging for them to stop in and stop my brother from using me. My family is biased, as am I, against my brother's ex. She is a human piece of crap, sure, but I feel like this was one step too far in regards to the whole situation. She is still the mother of my niece, and I feel it is completely crappy of me to deprive her of at least showing up to support her daughter. My brother and niece are more than happy about this, but I feel like we've taken this to a level where two wrongs don't make a right. As a child of divorce, I've been in this situation before, and if the niece didn't want her mom there, you did the right thing. There's nothing quite like being forced to see a parent you want nothing to do with, let alone having to do it in front of peers at a competition. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Why should your niece be forced to be around her crazy mom if she doesn't want to be? This sounds like a pretty clear case of ex-sister-in-law making her bed and having to lie in it. It would be different if it was just your brother using your restraining order to keep his ex away. But if it is also what your niece wants, then her mom needs to put some work into their relationship before her opinion matters. Not the a-hole. You didn't do anything. The child didn't want her mother there. If your ex-sister-in-law loved, cared, and respected her daughter, she wouldn't go even if you weren't there. This is not your fault, it's her own. And don't put it in your head they were using you. Maybe they genuinely wanted you there. A week ago, I thought my biggest Christmas decision was what to get my boyfriend, whom we will call Dan. Eventually, I decided on something he mentioned a while ago, a DNA test kit. I did some research on the best kind, and even went down the rabbit hole of theories around these tests. Despite the stories, I decided it was still a good gift because of how many times he's mentioned it in passing. It's not something he would ever expect to get from me, but something that I know would excite him. The perfect gift, right? Wrong. A couple days after ordering it, his mom asked me for gift ideas for him. We've exchanged ideas before, and I ended up just telling her the items off the list that I bought, and I figured I'd tell her the main part of the gift. As soon as I mentioned DNA test, she went completely pale and started to fidget. She said, "Oh boy, that makes me nervous. You might have to wait on that gift, maybe until his birthday. His dad and I have to talk." My initial reaction, of course, is, "Oh crap." And right about then, Dan walks in from the garage, so I couldn't get any more details. The next day, I texted her saying I wanted to talk. That evening, she caught me right after Dan went out to warm up the car. She started to explain that they used a sperm donor because her and now ex-husband couldn't have kids. She went on to say how every child is God's gift, and he wanted them to have Dan and Will, his brother, also donor conceived. I'm getting frustrated at this point because all I want to say is that I'm not comfortable knowing that information before Dan does. I'm not comfortable lying to him, and this is majorly stressing me out. I tell her this, and she just says she doesn't know when is a good time to tell them because Will lives out of state, and she wants to tell them together. We didn't get to finish the conversation then, but I really want to tell her that they need to tell him soon because I don't feel right keeping this info from him, and it sounds like they aren't really in a rush to tell them. She mentioned his birthday, which isn't until July. I'm thinking they should tell him before the new year, because there won't ever be a good time. He's 24. They had plenty of years to find a good time. Am I an a-hole if I tell her a date they need to tell him by? I'm extremely stressed, and he can already tell something is bothering me, and he is starting to get frustrated that I won't talk about it. Not the a-hole, though thank goodness this came up before you gave him the DNA kit. You're right that there will never really be a good time now. His mom has definitely left it too late. I wouldn't recommend it, but a surefire way of forcing the issue would be to give your boyfriend the DNA kit anyway. Not worth it for Christmas, but maybe necessary if it hasn't come up by his birthday. What I would recommend would be talking with his mother one more time, explaining again what a difficult position she's put you in. If she's still not budging, then talk to your boyfriend. Say his mom let something slip to you that you are finding hard to keep from him, but that he really needs to hear directly from his mom. And be there for him. This is going to be rough whatever way it goes. Not the a-hole. They should have told him by now. It's nothing to be ashamed about. I would tell her that you're giving him the DNA test for Christmas as planned, and let her make the decision from there. He'll find out one way or another. Not the a-hole. He's an adult, and also there's a lot of things, medically, it's important to know about if one can. He's been thinking he's the father's blood this whole time, giving an inaccurate medical history to doctors. That's not really great. Besides that, clearly there are things, especially in this day and age, that can make the truth possibly come out. And they should try to give him the nicest, safest possible reveal.